if you plan on voting this year, don't go blaming the Democrats for what the Republican voters want. The Republican voters, they want to take us back to the Stone Age, and they want all the women to live like the Handmaid's Tale back from the 1800s, if not before then. So on Tuesday night, the far Republican state, Delaware, Dan Cox won the Maryland gubernatorial primary. He was leading his closest competitor, Kelly Schulz, by 16 points Wednesday night. He'd won the most conservative counties of the state, near the West Virginia border, with more than 60% of that vote. He won generally Democratic counties like Baltimore City and the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Schulz, Schulz, who was a former cabinet officer for the popular GOP, Governor Larry Hogan, is managing to win only 2 of the state's 24 jurisdictions. Um, um, Cox is wholly unelectable in Maryland, a state that President Joe Biden won by 30 percentage points, where Democratic college-educated white voters and black voters are both plentiful. A fierce advocate of former squatter Donald Trump's lies about the election, Cox arranged a bus caravan for Trump sycophants to attend the January 6, 2021 Klan riot. The Klan riot rally that preceded the attack on the U.S. Capitol. During the attack, Cox tweeted that Mike Pence is a traitor. Well, yes and no, but it's more likely. It's more that Donald Trump and the inbreeding sycophants that support him are traitors. That's not all. Cox supported impeaching Hogan over his support for the COVID-19 mitigation measures, such as the mask mandate. He has at least touted QAnon conspiracy theories movements. He supports gutting the Maryland's gun control laws and heavily restricting abortion rates. It's a certain form of punditry. A form of punditry will tell you that Cox's victory is the result of Democratic meddling, even though the Republicans are the ones that are meddling. The Democratic Governors Association, wanting to ensure an easy victory in November for the Democratic candidate, spent more than $1 million on ads highlighting these stances ahead of Tuesday's primary. The Democratic groups, especially the DGA, have spent tens of millions of dollars on similar ads aiming to promote similarly unelectable candidates in Colorado, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and elsewhere. Now, these efforts have promoted no small amount of teeth gnashing that the Republicans have stood up to since the Republicans have stood up to Trump's election lies, including Hogan, Senator Mitt Romney, and Representative Peter Meijer. They have suggested it shows Democrats are not serious when they call these candidates a threat to our democracy. Other Democrats, often glancing back at Hillary Clinton's not-so-hidden hopes that Trump would win the GOP presidential primary in 2016, even though he was considered a squatter, he wasn't a president, say these efforts are doomed to backfire. Now, many of these concerns are legitimate. It's fully possible that a candidate like Doug Mastriano, the fake Christian nationalist and election denier who won the GOP gubernatorial nomination in Pennsylvania, could win in what looks like a strong year for Republicans. Polling shows Mastriano trailing Attorney General Josh Shapiro, the Democratic nominee, by surmountable margins. Some Democratic operatives have suggested the millions spent now would be of more use in November. There's an obvious question about whether it's ethical to support candidates who threaten our democracy in any fashion. No, it's not. Many of these criticisms ignore a more salient fact. GOP voters want candidates like Mastriano and Cox. The fact that these candidates think that the 2020 presidential election was stolen, and that they wholeheartedly embrace conspiracy theories, the Christian nationalism, and unflinching conservative views, are the futures in a GOP primary, not bugs. Otherwise, Democratic meddling wouldn't work. Furthermore, Republican leaders have stood by candidates who have espoused similar views. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who's a Republican from California, declined to kick Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's from Georgia, in the Republicans' upper committee position. The National Republican Senatorial Committee is set to spend millions of dollars this fall boosting the campaign of Nevada Attorney General Adam Laxalt, he sought to overturn Biden's rightful win in the Silver State. Now, none of the ads Democrats have aired have hidden their purposes in the past. Democratic meddling efforts have used anodyne names like Duty and Country to hide who was behind the television ads that they funded. That hasn't been the case since 2022. For 2022, Democratic candidates and groups have aired ads under their own name or otherwise made it clear that Democrats are behind these ads. Now the Republicans who oppose Cox, led by Hogan, held press conferences to highlight what the DGA was doing. It did not matter to the state's Republican voters who happily ignored their state's ultra-popular governor. And here it is worth noting that Hogan's fellow ultra-popular East Coast Republican governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, chose not to run for re-election after it was clear he would lose to a Trump-endorsed challenger in a primary. Democrats also noted that Hogan hardly seemed totally dedicated to Cox's defeat, spending time in the weeks leading up to the election campaign in New Hampshire and meeting donors at a Republican Governors Association meeting in Colorado as he readies a potential 2024 presidential run. I doubt that Hogan would even run for president, but who knows? A second race in Maryland on Tuesday drives home the clear GOP desire for ultra-conservative candidates. Republican nominated Michael Perutka, a neo-Nazi Confederate activist whose views are even more far right-wing than Cox's in the race for Attorney General. There's no Democratic interference in the race. Perutka was leading his opponent, the moderate former prosecutor Jim Shellac, by a 16-point margin on Wednesday night, identical to Cox's lead over Schultz. Similarly, Mastriano consistently led in polling in the Pennsylvania primary well before any Democratic attempt to put their thumb on the scale. Darren Bailey, the conservative candidate whom Democrats promoted in Illinois' governor race, did not have a consistent lead, but he won ultimately by 42 percentage points. That's pretty pathetic, but you know. The Republicans voted for Dan Cox in Maryland's GOP gubernatorial primary because they like his position, not because Democrats tricked them. There are places where Trump-endorsed election-denying candidates have flopped in primaries, like in Colorado and Georgia. But as the Washington Post's Aaron Blake notes, those states have open primaries, allowing the independents and even some Democrats to cast their ballots. When a closed primary leaves the GOP base to its own devices, there's little chance of stopping the Trump-style Republicans. Colorado is the state where Democratic efforts saw the biggest flop that could most easily backfire. National Democrats spent roughly $5 million boosting the campaign of State Representative Ron Hanks, who's an election denier, while also playing up the moderate credentials of businessman Joe O'Dea. The hope was Republicans would choose the seemingly unelectable Hanks. Instead, the Republicans nominated O'Dea, meaning Democrats spent significant amount of cash on ads playing up the GOP's candidate's moderation. Now, many attempts to meddle in elections flop. Republicans worked unsuccessfully to promote a progressive House candidate in Kansas in 2018, and Democrats tried to lip the unpopular Chris Kobach in Kansas GOP's Senate primary back in 2020. At the same time, Democrats owe their bare 50-seat Senate majority to a successful interference election campaign in the 2018 West Virginia GOP primary, which enabled the closet Republican Senator Joe Manchin to squeak out a win against a weaker opponent. Now, Colorado's gubernatorial race, however, might provide the best example yet of some Democratic operatives and believe that the distinction between Trump-style Republicans and the party's mainstream is irrelevant. There, Democrats hope to knock out the supposed moderate candidate, University of Colorado Regent Heidi Ganahl, and they failed on that part. Now on Monday, Ganahl announced her running mate, a businessman who hosted John Eastman at his home, the law professor who helped Trump work to overturn the election and had himself called the election stolen. Now basically, so don't go blaming the Democrats for what the Republicans are wanting. So basically, so both parties have their fucking faults, and we already know this, but the Republicans have the worst faults of anybody. So like I said, don't go blaming the Democrats for this. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little, it's a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.